The U.S. government has two sets of financial books and has never passed a single audit in its entire history. A congressman expensed a $500 bottle of wine as an office supply and got away with it. A politician used your donation money to pay for his iguana's vet bills. Another one won a re-election from inside a prison cell and got more votes than before. If you think you have seen it all, then buckle up because we have 49 of the most insane, jaw-dropping, and ridiculous facts about American political corruption that will make you laugh and lose your mind at the same time. Smash that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling us which one made your jaw hit the floor the hardest. 1. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., a fully grown elected congressman looked at a $500 bottle of wine and wrote office supply on the receipt. And this man did not flinch or sweat even a little bit. He submitted that expense report with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in his entire life. The government just paid it without blinking once. This was not some backroom shady deal. This was a suit-wearing elected official deciding that a bottle of wine deserved to sit right next to printer paper on a taxpayer-funded expense report. 2. Florida has given America many things, but nothing tops the politician who used campaign donations to pay for his pet iguana's veterinary bills. This cold-blooded little reptile was getting medical care funded by people who thought they were helping a political campaign. The man walked into that vet's office and handed over the campaign card like it was the most normal thing in the world. Somewhere in an accounting office, a real human being looked at a receipt from a lizard doctor and just approved it without asking a single question. 3. A New York senator had $90,000 in cold, hard bribe money sitting inside his freezer and thought that was a completely genius hiding spot. This man was walking around shaking hands and giving speeches about integrity while his kitchen was literally storing illegal cash next to his frozen dinners. When the FBI finally showed up and opened that freezer, they found the money neatly wrapped and just sitting there. The senator had apparently never heard of a bank account, or at minimum a better hiding spot than the place where normal people keep their ice cream. 4. A congressman ran for re-election from inside a prison cell while actively serving time for corruption. And not only did he win, but he won by a bigger margin than before. The voters knew he was in prison. They knew exactly why he was there. They looked at their ballot, saw a convicted corrupt politician, and said, yes, this is still our guy. This man was sitting in a jail jumpsuit collecting votes like they were commissary points, and the people of his district sent him right back to Washington, D.C. without a single apology. 5. Down in Texas, a state official looked at Disney World and thought, yes, this is absolutely a legitimate youth outreach program, and then billed the entire trip to the taxpayers. The hotel rooms, the park tickets, the Mickey Mouse ears, and probably the overpriced churros all went straight onto a government expense report. This man walked through the gates of the happiest place on earth, knowing full well that hardworking Texas taxpayers were footing the bill, and he had the nerve to call it official government business with a completely straight face. 6. Why Congress members are legally allowed to trade stocks using insider information they receive in classified government briefings, and if a normal American citizen did the exact same thing, they would be arrested and charged with a federal crime. These are the same people who write the laws against insider trading. They sit in a classified meeting learning secrets that could move the stock market, and then they go home and make trades based on exactly that information. It is completely legal for them and completely illegal for everyone else, and they voted to keep it that way. 7. A Louisiana politician decided that the best place to accept a bribe was a Popeyes parking lot in broad daylight, like he was picking up a mobile order. And this man was an elected official with a government office and a staff, and he chose a fast food parking lot as his preferred location for illegal money exchanges. The FBI caught the whole thing, and the most shocking part was not the bribe itself, but the fact that he did it outside a Popeyes in the middle of the day, like nobody was going to notice a thing. 8. The IRS sent out $4 billion in tax refunds to people who listed a prison cell as their home address. and did not catch it until long after the checks were already cashed. These were people sitting behind bars filing tax returns and collecting refunds from the government that put them there in the first place. And the IRS had one job, which was to check whether the address on the return was a federal correctional facility, and somehow that step just did not happen for billions of dollars worth of refunds going out the door. 9. A U.S. senator managed to fall asleep during his own corruption hearing on live national television in front of cameras and journalists and the entire American public watching at home. This man was the one being investigated, and he could not even stay awake long enough to hear the allegations against him. He sat in that chair in front of Congress with his eyes closed like he was on a long-haul flight, and nobody shook him awake because, honestly, at that point, what were they even going to say to him? 10. A California official got caught photoshopping himself into disaster relief photos from events he never actually attended so he could look like he was out there helping people in a crisis. This man was sitting comfortably somewhere while real people were dealing with a real disaster, and his solution was to open up a photo editor and paste his face into the scene. He posted these photos publicly, like nobody was going to zoom in, and noticed that the lighting on his head did not match a single thing in the background. 11. A congressman looked at a pair of $1,000 cowboy boots in a store window and thought, yes, these are absolutely constituent outreach materials, and then charged them directly to his campaign fund. These were not boots he was going to wear to a disaster zone or a community meeting, and these were expensive decorative cowboy boots that this man wanted for himself, and he simply wrote outreach on the receipt and moved on with his day. Somewhere a campaign donor thought their money was going toward flyers and phone calls, and it was actually going toward premium leather footwear. 12. A Virginia politician packed up his entire family, loaded them onto a plane, and flew them all the way to the Bahamas, and then had the absolute nerve to file the whole trip as an official government trade mission. The beaches were apparently very important to the economy. The hotel pool was probably a diplomatic necessity. And this man sat on a beach chair with his family eating seafood and charging it to taxpayers while calling it international government business. And somewhere back in Virginia, people were waiting for their actual elected official to do his actual job. 13. A Chicago alderman was standing at a podium giving a passionate speech at his very own anti-corruption rally, talking about accountability and clean government, when the FBI walked in and arrested him right there on the spot in front of everyone. The crowd had shown up to cheer for fighting corruption and ended up watching the main speaker get handcuffed instead. This man had organized the entire event himself and somehow did not think that publicly drawing attention to corruption while being corrupt himself was going to cause any problems for him personally. 14. A congressman was quietly running a full gambling ring out of his office on Capitol Hill while simultaneously voting on laws and collecting his government salary paid for by taxpayers. This was not a casual friendly poker night. This was an organized gambling operation being run from inside one of the most powerful buildings in the entire United States of America. People walk through those halls thinking they are near the center of democracy, and one of the offices was essentially a side business, taking bets and collecting money, like a casino with a congressional seal on the door. 15. The State Department spent $70,000 of taxpayer money buying copies of Barack Obama's books to stock its own libraries, which were libraries that the State Department itself controlled and operated. The government used public funds to purchase books written by the sitting president and then place those books in government buildings that the government ran. Nobody in the approval chain looked at that purchase order and thought, maybe we should think about this a little longer before signing off on $70,000 worth of one specific author's entire bibliography. 16. A Florida mayor sat across from an FBI agent who was running a sting operation and decided that the best bribe he could offer to make this whole corruption thing go away was a $25 Applebee's gift card. Not cash, not a check, not even a gift card to a nice restaurant. A $25 Applebee's gift card handed over like it was going to solve a federal investigation and buy the silence of a trained law enforcement professional. The FBI agent took it as evidence, and the mayor apparently thought that was a perfectly reasonable opening offer. 17. A U.S. senator looked at his dog's regular grooming appointments and decided the most logical thing to do was submit them as official security expenses on his government account paid for by American taxpayers. This man's dog was getting washed and trimmed and blow-dried on the public dime under the category of national security. Nobody in his office questioned why security expenses included appointments at what was clearly a pet grooming salon, and the bills kept getting approved month after month like Protecting America required a very clean and well-groomed golden retriever. 18. A Chicago politician had such an impressive year that he managed to get indicted twice in the same calendar year for two completely separate crimes that had absolutely nothing to do with each other. Most people spend a year trying to get a promotion or finish a home renovation project. This man spent 12 months collecting two separate federal indictments, like they were achievements unlocked on a video game. Law enforcement had to open two different case files on the same person in the same year, and somewhere a prosecutor had to organize his schedule around charging this one individual twice. 19. A congressman hired his college roommate for a national security advisor position, despite the fact that this man had zero qualifications, zero experience, and zero background in anything related to national security or government intelligence. These two guys used to split a dorm room, and now one of them was sitting in meetings about classified threats to the United States of America. The roommate went from being someone who borrowed your shampoo and ate your leftovers to being someone with access to some of the most sensitive information the American government possesses. 20. The U.S. government bought 6 million pounds of cheese that nobody wanted, and instead of stopping and reassessing the situation, they just kept buying more cheese every single year and stacking it up somewhere. 6 million pounds is not an accidental purchase. That is a committed and ongoing relationship with unwanted dairy products, funded entirely by taxpayer money. At some point, a government official had to look at a warehouse full of millions of pounds of cheese that the American public did not ask for and sign off on buying even more of it without questioning a single thing. 21. A senator's wife mysteriously received $500,000 from a company right after her husband had just handed that exact same company a very large government contract. And somehow nobody in Washington, D.C. found this even slightly suspicious enough to investigate properly. The timing was so obvious that you could set a calendar to it. But the husband signs the contract on one side of town, and the wife collects $500,000 on the other side. And when people started asking questions, the answer was essentially that this was all just a very lucky coincidence, and nobody went to jail. 22. A congressman decided that his private vacation home needed a treadmill and then billed the entire thing to the government as an official expense, because apparently staying fit while on personal vacation is a matter of national importance. This was not a treadmill in a government gym or a federal building. This was exercise equipment installed inside his personal private home that he used for his own personal vacations, and he submitted the receipt to the government like it was the most reasonable thing an elected official had ever done with public money. 23. The CIA ran a fake vaccination program in Pakistan just to collect DNA from local residents to gather intelligence, and when the whole operation got exposed, it destroyed trust in real vaccination programs across the entire region for almost a decade. Parents, who had nothing to do with American intelligence operations, stopped vaccinating their children because they no longer trusted the people holding the needles. The CIA used public health as a cover story for a spy operation, and the people who paid the price for that decision were children who had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. 24. A U.S. official expensed a $3,000 chocolate fountain as a diplomatic reception expense, and the reception he was referring to was attended exclusively by his own family members with zero actual diplomats or government officials present at any point during the evening. This man rented a chocolate fountain, put his family around it, and submitted the bill to the American government under the category of international diplomacy. Somewhere, a hardworking taxpayer was filing their own taxes while their money was being used to fund a chocolate fountain at a family dinner that had nothing to do with running the country. 25. A governor was laundering money so carelessly and so confidently that he accidentally paid himself the same amount twice in the same transaction and did not notice that he had double charged himself for 6 entire months before anyone caught it. This was not a complex, sophisticated financial scheme. This was a man so bad at being corrupt that he could not even keep track of his own illegal payments. The auditors did not have to work very hard on this one because the governor had essentially left a paper trail that pointed directly at himself twice. 26. Congress has not managed to pass a single balanced budget in over 25 years, but during that exact same stretch of time, they found the energy and the votes to give themselves a pay raise 11 separate times without breaking a sweat. The same group of people who cannot figure out how to balance the national checkbook have had absolutely no trouble figuring out how to increase their own salaries over and over again. They vote yes on their own raises faster than they vote on anything else, and the budget remains unbalanced while their bank accounts remain very healthy. 27. The U.S. government secretly tested biological agents on its own citizens in San Francisco and called it a routine experiment, like spraying unknown substances over a major American city full of people who had no idea what was happening was just a normal Tuesday for the military. People were going about their lives, and the government was conducting biological tests on them from above without consent, without warning, and without any intention of telling them what had just been released into the air they were breathing. They found out years later, and the official response was essentially a shrug. 28. A New Jersey mayor turned government contracts into what was essentially a public auction, complete with starting bids and everything where businesses could come and bid on contracts that were supposed to be awarded based on merit and qualifications and the public good. This man ran his city like it was an eBay store where the listings happened to be taxpayer-funded projects worth millions of dollars. Contractors would show up knowing exactly how this worked, and the mayor would sit there collecting offers like he was running a legitimate marketplace, instead of committing federal crimes in a government office. 29. A congressman submitted fake mileage reimbursement claims for trips he never actually took and collected the government money successfully for 11 consecutive years without a single person in the accounting department noticing that this man was being paid to travel to places he never went. 11 years is not a mistake or an oversight. That is a decade-long commitment to submitting fraudulent paperwork with complete confidence that nobody was ever going to look closely enough at the receipts to notice that the trips simply did not happen at any point in time. 30. A U.S. city hired a consulting firm and paid them $300,000 to conduct a full professional analysis of the city's operations. And after all that time and all that money, the consulting firm came back with their official recommendation, which was that the city needed to hire more consultants. The city paid $300,000 to be told to spend more money on people like the ones they had just paid $300,000 to. Nobody in that meeting stood up and pointed out what was happening, and the city reportedly took the recommendation seriously. 31. A politician was so completely unbothered by the concept of getting caught that he submitted actual receipts for the bribes he had been paying as legitimate business expenses on his official tax return. Like the IRS was just going to see the word bribe on a receipt and move right along without any follow-up questions. This man sat down with his tax documents, looked at his bribe receipts, and decided that deducting them was the most logical financial move available to him. The auditors who found this reportedly had to take a moment before they could continue reading the file. 32. The U.S. government accidentally mailed a package of classified documents to a completely random civilian who had nothing to do with the government or any classified program, and then sent him a polite letter asking if he would be kind enough to just mail them back when he got a chance. a regular American opened his mailbox one day and found government secrets inside, and the official response from one of the most powerful intelligence operations on the planet was essentially a please and thank you note requesting the return of sensitive national security materials through standard postal service. 33. A state senator was caught live streaming himself playing a poker game from the Senate floor on his phone during an active vote on education funding for children across his entire state. This man was supposed to be deciding how schools would be funded, and instead, he was dealing cards on a live stream while real votes were being cast around him. The children whose schools depended on that vote had no idea their education budget was being decided by someone who was simultaneously trying to figure out whether to fold or raise on a pair of threes. 34. A U.S. official signed off on a $2 million government contract and sent the payment to a company that had officially been out of business for 3 full years before the ink on that contract even dried. Nobody in the approval process checked whether the company receiving $2 million of taxpayer money was actually a functioning business that existed in any legal or operational capacity at the time the contract was being written and signed and processed and paid out completely. 35. A congressman's own staff discovered that their boss had been charging the U.S. government rent money every single month to use a building that he personally owned as his congressional office. This man was collecting a government salary for being a congressman and then also collecting a separate government check as the landlord of the building where he chose to do his congressional work. He was essentially paying himself with taxpayer money from 2 different directions at the same time and filing the paperwork for both, without appearing to find anything unusual about the arrangement. 36. The U.S. government paid a defense contractor full price for 10,000 parachutes needed for military operations. And when the delivery arrived and someone finally opened the boxes, they found cardboard inside instead of parachutes. And it then took the government 2 full years to officially notice that the parachutes they had paid for were not parachutes at all. Somewhere, a contractor loaded up trucks with cardboard boxes, collected a check for actual parachutes, and apparently trusted that nobody on the receiving end was going to open the boxes anytime soon. And they were correct about that for an impressively long time. 37. A mayor had been taking money from the city for so long and so consistently that when auditors finally showed up and confronted him with the evidence, his entire legal defense was that he genuinely believed the money he had been stealing was a bonus that the city had decided to give him. This man looked at investigators with a straight face and explained that he thought the city had simply chosen to reward him with large sums of money on a regular basis without telling him about it or putting it in writing or getting approval from anyone. 38. A U.S. senator was using his campaign's private jet to fly his kids to school field trips and then billing the campaign for the fuel, the crew, and apparently also the snacks consumed during flights that had absolutely nothing to do with any political campaign or government business of any kind. The donors who funded that campaign thought their money was going toward winning an election. Instead, it was going toward getting a group of children to a field trip destination in a private jet, while the snack budget was carefully documented and submitted as a campaign expense. 39. A city councilman approved a $400,000 public mural project for the city and then awarded the painting contract to his girlfriend's art class, which was made up entirely of 8-year-old children who were then paid with public funds to create official government-commissioned artwork on public buildings. The city spent $400,000 on a mural, and the artists were children in an elementary school art class whose teacher happened to be dating the man who controlled the budget. The mural was completed and presumably hung in a place where taxpayers could see exactly where their money went. 40. The federal government discovered that it had been paying rent on a completely empty building for 27 straight years because nobody had updated the paperwork to reflect the fact that the building had been vacant for nearly 3 decades and the checks just kept going out automatically every single month. For 27 years, the government was a loyal and punctual tenant of an empty building. No employees, no operations, no reason for the lease to exist. just a building sitting empty somewhere, collecting government rent money, because stopping the payments would have required someone to fill out a form. 41. A congressman submitted an official government expense report written entirely in crayon, and the most unbelievable part of the whole situation is that the people responsible for reviewing and approving that expense report looked at the crayon writing and stamped it approved without calling anyone or asking a single follow-up question. This was a grown adult elected official submitting financial documents to the United States government in crayon, and the system just processed it, like everything was completely normal and in order and met all the required standards for official congressional paperwork. 42. A U.S. official managed to sell the exact same plot of government land to 3 completely different buyers at the exact same time and collected payment from all 3 of them before anyone realized that one piece of land cannot legally belong to 3 separate people who all paid full price for it simultaneously. This man sat in an office and sold the same property 3 times in a row, like he was listing the same item on 3 different websites, and just waiting to see which buyer showed up first to claim something that was never actually his to sell. 43. A state governor looked at the Emergency Disaster Relief Fund that was specifically set aside to help citizens recover from a natural disaster and decided that the most pressing emergency requiring immediate funding was the renovation of the swimming pool at his private mansion. Real people who had lost their homes and their belongings were waiting for disaster relief money, and the governor was on the phone with a pool contractor discussing tile options and water features while submitting the invoices directly to the emergency fund meant for the people he was supposed to be helping. 44. A Pentagon official reviewed and then approved a contract described in the paperwork as mission-critical office supplies, which is the kind of language that makes people think of important military-grade materials, and when the delivery finally arrived, the mission-critical supplies turned out to be scented candles and decorative throw pillows. The Pentagon, which runs the most powerful military operation on Earth, signed off on a contract for scented candles and throw pillows under a category that suggested they were essential to carrying out government missions, and the contract sailed through the approval process without a single person asking what the mission was. 45. A congressman did not show up to work for an entire calendar year and still collected his full government salary, plus all his benefits and expenses without anyone in his office or in Congress officially flagging the fact that this elected official had been completely absent for 12 straight months. His constituents sent him to Washington, D.C. to represent them, and he represented them by not being in Washington, D.C. for a full year, while the paychecks funded by those same constituents kept arriving in his account right on schedule every single time. 46. A city mayor looked at his monthly streaming bills for Netflix and Hulu and HBO and decided that the most reasonable thing to do was charge all 3 subscriptions to the city's taxpayer-funded account under the official budget category of public media research, like watching television at home was a form of civic duty that the people of his city were obligated to financially support. 3 separate streaming services were being paid for by city taxpayers and filed under research, while the mayor sat on his couch watching shows that had nothing to do with running a city. 47. A U.S. senator stood up and introduced a bill specifically designed to fight government waste and reduce unnecessary spending, which sounds like exactly the kind of responsible legislation that voters want their senators to focus on, except that buried deep inside that same bill was a clause that quietly sent $50 million directly to his own district in a move that essentially used an anti-waste bill to do the exact thing the bill was publicly claiming to fight against. He announced the bill with a press release about fiscal responsibility and signed his name to both the reform and the payout at the same time. 48. A local politician was caught on FBI sting camera footage, physically stuffing cash into his own socks during the operation, and when investigators confronted him about the footage of him putting money into his socks, he looked at them and tried to argue that what they had just watched on camera was not a bribe but was actually campaign literature that he had chosen to store inside his footwear for reasons that he did not fully elaborate on during the conversation with federal law enforcement agents who had the whole thing recorded. 49. The United States government keeps two separate sets of financial books, with one version made available to the public and one internal version that operates completely outside of public view. And on top of that, the government has never once successfully completed a full financial audit in its entire history, which means the most powerful country on earth cannot fully account for where its own money goes, and has decided that the solution to that problem is to simply never finish the audit and keep running the whole operation anyway, like nothing unusual is happening with the finances of an entire nation. And there you have it. The people running the most powerful country on earth are out here stuffing cash in their socks, buying cheese nobody asked for, and expensing chocolate fountains as diplomacy. Completely normal stuff. If your jaw is still on the floor, go ahead and pick it up and then smash that like button, subscribe to BrainFumble, and turn on notifications so you never miss us exposing the next round of absolute nonsense. Share this with someone who still thinks the government has it all figured out. Now drop a comment telling us which one of these 49 facts made you lose the most faith in humanity.